Love what you're watching? Don't miss a moment of the bottom line or any of your favorite Now Media TV shows live or on demand, anytime, anywhere. Download the free Now Media TV app on Roku or iOS and enjoy instant access to our full lineup of bilingual programming in both English and Spanish. Prefer to listen on the go? Catch the podcast version of the show on the Now Media TV website at www.nowmedia.tv. From business and breaking news to lifestyle, culture, and everything in between, Now Media TV is streaming 24/7, ready whenever you are. We are back on the bottom line, and we are still here with Darrell Steed, the automotive consultant, the founder of Smartwolf, and a specialist in maximizing profit where most dealers are bleeding cash. This segment is all about the buy center, that chaotic zone where a dealership decides what inventory to bring in next. Darrell helps teams simplify the process and turn guesswork into strategy. So, Darrell, it's such a pleasure to have you.
Appreciate being back, and this is a topic that I'm really fired up about. So,
Perfect, perfect. So let's get right to the bottom line. The problem that I see, if I were to sum this up for dealerships across the states, is their buy center is chaotic, and it often feels like they're guessing which cars will sell, and that comes with a lot of risk. So if we're diving into this, what's the biggest myth about what makes a great vehicle to bring into inventory?
so buy center is this new buzzword about how you get acquisition. And the first thing you have to understand is where are you getting it from? It can be auctions, private party, third party leads. There's lots of sources to get this. I specialize in maximizing that inventory and profitability. So I try to get away from the auction. They're not bad. They have a use, but there's a lot of fees and there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of things you deal with. So how do you generate your own profitability and bring that back in? And that's through private party, third party leads, first party leads, and tier four marketing are also known as social media. And you got to know the first thing you want to know with what cars you want to get is your sales strategy. What have you sold before? What are you going to sell? And more importantly, are you a volume store or are you a more profit store but low volume, right? Like, and it doesn't mean you're a bad store. You're just like, I'm not trying to sell 700 cars a month because that takes its own challenge too. I want to sell 100 and I want to make a little bit more profit. You need to know that and you have to own that decision. We see all the time stores and like, I want to sell more cars. And I always ask that question. If I bought 100 cars for you right now, dropped them on your lot, what would happen to your service department? What would happen to your recon? What would happen to your, and people go, oh, I didn't think of it. You have to think about three steps ahead. You can't be reactive to this market anymore. It just changes too fast. And so that's where buying comes in of how are we now taking control of our business and bringing profitability in from the streets, right? Rather than being reactive and having to go make bad decisions because now we need it rather than being proactive to it.
It is funny because this same exact thing you said applies to manufacturing across the board as well. When you're buying inventory to produce a product, if you streamline that process so well, now you've got all this product that you have to sell. So there's so much that ties to the worlds I'm so used to. And it's interesting because you put it in such a simple way. It's easy to understand and easy to explain because I feel like when it comes to, oh, I want to sell more cars, a lot of people aren't thinking about the response that comes with that, the
Sure.
automatic thing that happens in that process. Now you're having to overload service department, and now maybe personnel is going to be stretched pretty thin because you got all this additional inventory things to deal with. It can be troublesome, and a lot of people think build more products, sell more products doesn't always mean you're going to make more profit. That comes with
Sure.
additional expenses and costs as well. So you couldn't be more right, but how can a dealership simplify and streamline that buy center process?
So let's give probably the three simplest things that I teach with Smart Wolf and Street Smarts, which you see the background behind me. That's the acquisition academy that I've created. But the first one is that you really need to understand is buying is the hardest job in your store. There's not anything harder than that because you have to go one, understand inventory, understand pricing, understand value, and you have to engage with your customers unless it's an auction. So you have there's so many pieces that you can't kind of halfway do this. You got to be focused to it. Number two, and probably the one that we see where most dealers struggle or fail at, is not understanding that for, I want to say it's 10 years running, they are the second or third least trusted position in America for an automobile salesperson. So knowing that, you have to create a different dynamic. And there are two companies that have done a relatively good job of that, which has created more noise, which is your CarMax and Carvana. You need to be the reason they, what do you do they don't? What do you do that's better or easier or faster? You need to create a different dynamic of not only do we sell cars, which we know we're good at, we also buy, but our buyers don't sell cars, right? Like we want to treat it as its own thing. The customer doesn't have to get that 1980s version of the car business. And number three, which is the one where I spend all my time in, is you have to find people that care but actually want to win, right? And I breed a winning opportunity and a winning mindset because you're going to hear no, it's too low, I want more. I mean, you're going to hear every version of this, and you need people when they hear that know how to talk to customers, educate customers, and create a dynamic experience that allow, as we talked about, them to know, like, and trust you to want to do business with you because your people are the difference in this industry. Not your product, not your money. It is the people that people want to deal with, right? People want connection. And so those are the three simple things I say. That's where we're going to start. And then we're going to get into a plethora of other things. But these are the core foundations of what we need to understand to do it correctly.
Man, I tell you what, I kind of wish I had a note and pen for everybody that is watching this because that is so powerful and so true in so many levels. It's so easily missed when you're caught up in the day-to-day mundane, the grind on a regular basis. You can miss some of those underlying, very important core aspects of the business. It's so necessary. And that customer experience, that one-to-one relationship, that mutual respect. There's so much there that can make a positive impact on the business. And if it's overlooked, it can be extremely detrimental to the reputation and success overall. So it's funny because I've got to ask this question because I know there's people out there that are running one way or the other and might not see what the right path is. But what data should guide the buying process and the buying decisions? Is it the gut feeling or is it the metrics? Or are we looking at a combination?
Man, I'll probably get harangued for saying anything like this from both sides of the aisle, but it is really a combination. The analytics and math has to be your driving force to sit there and do the, get the book out of your pocket and figure out what it might be and the feel for it. That was very successful when we didn't have the analytics, when we didn't have these fast moving drivers. So you want to look at the math. However, there are certain things that come up that you need to understand how are you going to do it. It's not just the math. It's, is this car best end user for me? Is this car the best end user for this market? And to give an example is, all right, if you're in the Midwest and or let's say you're in the like Texas area, right? That's big truck country. So trucks are going to perform typically a little bit better. But if you get like a car that, let's say, like a Mini Cooper, well, that probably isn't going to be the fast mover in that area. It's not a bad car. It's just not right end user for that. So even though the analytics will say you bought it right, if it's not the right car for you, you have to keep in mind where that's going to go. Where are you moving that? The other thing you really want to understand in the math is it is a numbers game. So you really have to understand, are we buying everything? Are we surgical to what do we want to buy? Like have a mission of what you're going to go after, and you have to own that mission. So that's where the analytics come in too. If you sell cars $15,000 to $40,000, don't try to go buy $60,000 cars. Don't try to buy $10,000 cars. Stay in a zone that you know allows you to operate your business unit rather than someone else's vision.
I think this is kind of the perfect segue into this next question, which is almost mythical in a way. This is one of the hard ones I have to deal with in different industries. So I'm curious your thoughts on this. But how do you teach teams to see what the market will want in that next 30 to 60 days, not just today?
Well, that is one of those mythical ones. One, you're going to use a little bit of what you've sold previously in the last 2 weeks to a month, right? To kind of see what the trends are. The other thing you want to look at, which is historical trends, not for what we sold them for, but where do we see markets pick up? Because unfortunately, as much as we don't want to go back in the past can teach us things about what's coming. Outside of COVID, which kind of disrupted the market for a while, for a year and a half, 2 years, it was we knew in winter it slowed down. We also knew when weather crept up. So if we know snow's coming, it's probably a good idea to buy some four-wheel drives. If you're in, let's say, sunny California and San Diego, four-wheel drives probably not necessary. Two-wheel drives are probably okay. So it's understanding your dynamic, your market, and seasonal trends. But then the other thing is, which you might not have experience with, is have a risk assessment of what cars are you willing to go after that you don't have experience with to build experience. That doesn't mean you decide I'm going to buy 30 Range Rovers or I'm going to buy, a bunch of Rivians, right? You like, but you might buy one or two and see if we've never sold them, we don't have experience. We also need to get outside of our comfort zone and start developing strategies so that we can grow as other markets shrink.
That's a really good point, actually, and it's one of those things where you can only go. I've always learned how to utilize my previous data, track everything so you can see you have the best possibility of seeing what's coming up, right? So seeing those
Sure.
trends, which I think is really ultimately the best way to go about it. So real quick, this has been absolute gold for those who want to sharpen their inventory game. Where can they find you? How can they reach out?
It would be hard not to find me. So there's two websites. I have smartwolfconsulting.com, and that's the one that's probably pulling up right now. And then I have the thing you see behind me is called Street Smarts. That's the acquisition academy. It's the first of its kind. So instead of a sales academy, it teaches you about acquisition. And that's at autostreetsmarts.com, which also pivots into the Smart Wolf. And then if you're one of those people you're like, I don't like websites, I understand. You're more of the social person, you're in social. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok. There will be no dancing, okay? But there is TikTok stuff. And Instagram, pretty much any one of those social media filters. And you just send me a message. And I'm one of those type of guys. It's like, there's no set thing. Like as you read the price plans, it gives you ranges because we customize everything based on what you need, not just saying, here's the playbook and then good luck. We want to make sure that you're successful.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully, people are going to be trying to find you pretty quickly. Now, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back on the bottom line with more Darrell.